Today I'm going to be talking about Flatlanders. Okay, who are the Flatlanders? Well, there's several sects of this religion. You have the flat earthers, you have the flat universers, and a lot of other flatlanders out there. People who propose or who deal with the world of flat. And one question I have with that is that they never define the word flat. They don't know what flat is, okay? But that's not the reason all these people are flatlanders. They're flatlanders because they use the wrong language. They use the language of mathematical physics, the one that most people learn in high school, college maybe, you know? And I would say 99.99% of humanity is a flatlander. And they use these words here. These are words that if you use these words to make your case in physics, you are a flatlander. Okay, so here they are. These are some of the words. They're not all the entire vocabulary. But if you use words like waves, and you can say, oh, the wave did this and the other and this other thing. Use the word ether in any way, shape, or form. You use the word space-time, black hole, plasma. You know, a lot of the electric universers, they can't live without their plasma, their beloved plasma. They also talk about vortex. Mainstream usually talks about dark matter, dark energy. They use these words such as mass, time, force, charge, field. At least the establishment uses the word particle quite a bit. Usually dissidents use the word wave, okay? And they all like to do experiments, measurements. Some of them even do equations. All these folks are flatlanders. None of this has anything to do with science, let alone with physics. Okay, so we treat them as flatlanders. And yeah, some people say, Bill, you're offending us. You're ridiculing us. And all I can say is, no, I treat you with the respect that you deserve. Okay, so that's how we handled it here. Okay, so here's the mainstream flatlanders. Okay, what do they believe in? Well, here you have a synthesis. Okay, you have the flat universers. They believe that the universe is flat. Okay, this is what they talk about, the flat universe. And they include also the quantum mechanicers. Okay, so you have these two groups. You have one that tries to unify them, so known as string theorists. Okay, and what's the problem with them? Well, they are irrational because they are in the business of moving mathematical concepts. Some of the words that you just saw, those are mathematical concepts. What they do, they reify them, they turn them into physical objects, and they then begin to move them around. And here you have some of those words: time, space, time, energy, mass, field, particle, wave, black hole, dark matter. All these are concepts. None of these are physical objects. You cannot use these terms as nouns in physics. Big problem with them. They use the atomic model created by Niels Bohr and Ernst Rutherford, okay, which is the planetary model. Looks something like that. Okay, this is the hydrogen atom, supposedly. It's got a positive proton in the center, proton ball. We clarify that. It's got a little electron bead moving around it or somewhere around it. No one knows why the bead, the red electron bead, doesn't fall to the nucleus. In fact, that's what triggered quantum mechanics, the study of why that little bead doesn't fall to the nucleus. But then there's the question, why doesn't it fly out of this solar system, this little tiny solar system? You know, why does it orbit, or why does the bead stand around the proton bowling ball? That's the question. It doesn't fall to the nucleus, it doesn't run away, and we have no idea what this positive and negative stuff is all about. Okay, so that's their atom. And of course, if you can't answer those questions, then obviously you're not going to have a very rational theory because your hypothesis has not been constructed properly. You do not have the proper foundations. Okay. What is gravity according to these people? Well, they use concepts to explain a concept. The concept is known as gravity. Gravity is not a physical object. Gravity is what we're trying to explain. Okay, and they use these words: time, energy, field, mass. They work a lot on dimensions. Okay, then that's usually the cosmic world. Okay, quantum mechanics. They have these words that they've created: entanglement, superposition, decoherence, tunneling. They do not understand any of these words. They do not understand what causes these effects. All they do is they have named these effects. They use them for technology, And the problem there is that, people say, well, what is a quantum computer? Well, a quantum computer is a computer that uses these effects, but it's not because the computer proves quantum mechanics, the explanations, the physical interpretations of quantum mechanics. What these are just words that name the effects. That's it. It doesn't get beyond that. And so when you say entanglement, well, what are you saying? Well, you're saying this particle here affects that one over there without anything in between. And they cannot explain that. And if you cannot explain that, you're talking about black magic, okay? Because you're saying this affects that without anything between, without no physical cause. That's the issue. And then again, general relativity has all these terms there. And maybe the key one that I'm interested in is the little c equals a constant. It has been measured as a constant. People call it a constant, okay? Einstein proved it's a constant mathematically. In fact, it was people who came before him that did that. He just took the credit. But then everybody talks about FTL, faster than light. And you say, what do you mean faster than light? I thought special relativity was a done deal. It was proven that light travels at a constant speed and it travels at 300,000 kilometers per second. It's the speed limit of the universe. But then people can't live with that, and they say, no, let me talk about faster than light. And look, you find all these papers. You just do a Google. You Google what I did there, the oxidative, and you look for faster than light, and you find all these papers. And I just put the first couple pages there a little bit. You'll find tons of papers. These are from the scientific literature, supposedly physics literature. And they all talk about faster than light. They want to prove faster than light. They say they observed it in the lab, etc., etc., etc. Everybody talks about faster than light, despite the fact that Einstein, I think, set the record straight, saying there is no such thing as faster than light. You cannot even travel at the speed of light, because if you do, you turn into so-called energy. And these people also emphasize experiments and equations, especially equations. They're into math. They think that this is what science is about and physics is about, experiments and equations. And when I challenge them, they say, Bill, you're doing philosophy. You're doing semantics. They don't like me defining words in such a way that they can't get away from the definition. They want to skirt the definitions. So they don't have definitions used for physical interpretations. What they've created, this language, mathematical language, with concepts of mathematics, okay, usually quantitative concepts, and they use them as physical objects like energy, mass, and force field. And when you call their attention to that, they say, oh, you're doing semantics. So that's the status today. Who are the dissidents? Well, there's maybe 10% of people out there, I would say, in the world that are dissidents, that do not accept the explanations of the establishment. They think something's fishy about some of those explanations, and they had better. It means that it shows some degree of intelligence when you criticize the establishment, when they talk about black holes, Big Bang, dark matter. Of course, you're going to question a lot of that because it's all irrational. But what the question here is not the fact that the dissidents challenge the establishment. There's nothing wrong there. But science is not about criticizing. Science is about explaining what you offer in exchange. That's where science vibrates. And this is where the dissidents fail. Okay, and these are the dissidents here. Okay, you have these Flatlanders. You have some which are from the electric universe, probably the main group that challenges the establishment. You have the flat earthers. But a lot of these people are really conspiracists. Not all of them, but a lot of them. And they have some political gripes, and they bring them into physics. In other words, they have some problems with the way the governments are run, and they say, well, everything's a conspiracy. Everything's a hoax. And, I kind of draw the line between politics and science, politics and physics. I don't think you can automatically, extend hoaxes and conspiracies into science. And so that's where I usually confront these people. I'm saying that not everything in science is a conspiracy. There are interests, there are people who preserve their jobs, their income their careers, and they will do everything to stop anyone who interferes with that. There is a lot of that going out there, but not because of that is everything a conspiracy, everything's a hoax. Now, these people usually use words such as ether, plasma. They use positive and negative. Dielectric. What is a dielectric? What physical object is that? They like to talk about electricity, actually current. They talk about the flow of current. It's like talking about a flow of a river, as I explained a couple weeks ago. The river's already flowing, so you cannot talk about the flowing river. Not in science. That's okay in ordinary speech. They talk about vibration of fields, force, and charge, and all this other stuff. Counter space. Love that word. Counter space, it's the amount of space you have to put your beer on the counter. That's more or less what I think that is. Anyways, one of the problems is they use the same quantum atom. All these people, they use this model. The proton center and the electron bead somewhere around it. Usually they illustrate it as an orbit. Okay, sometimes they show it in dynamical mode where the bead goes around the proton. Other times, they explain that the little bead stays within what they call orbitals. Okay, what is an orbital? Well, it's the orbit of many orbits. That's what an orbital is. They say the orbital is a region which the electron, all of it on its own, cannot jump across. So they have these lanes, so to speak, and you can find the electron bead somewhere in there. Anyways, the point here is that the Flatlanders, the dissident Flatlanders, they're no different than the establishment in the sense that they use this same atom. And this atom later is denied by everyone. They say, well, that's not the real atom. So which is the real atom? Until you can come in there and tell me what your atom, the one you're going to use in your presentation. You cannot tell me what your atom looks like. You cannot even start your presentation. You cannot talk about the flow of beads, meaning electricity. You cannot talk about plasma. You cannot talk about ionization because we don't know what your atom looks like. And if you are going to use this atom, then stick to it and say, well, this is your atom. You can't at the end of your presentation deny it and say, well, by the way, that atom I've used throughout my presentation, that's not the real atom. Okay, then show us your real atom, okay, before you start talking. That's the way we look at it. Anyways, Flatlanders who are dissidents, they typically don't use the word time. They don't like these time things like time dilation, all that stuff. They're very strongly against that. Okay, so they are in general against all the conclusions of special relativity, all this time dilation, length contraction, mass increase. They don't like a lot of the conclusions of general relativity, especially Big Bang. They don't like that at all. They don't like space-time. They say, what do you mean space-time? What is space-time? They don't like the black hole, dark matter, dark energy, But one of the issues they have is that C, in many of their theories, or a lot of them at least, a lot of these dissident Flatlanders, they think that little c is a variable, that the light does not travel at a constant speed. Okay, so this is not everyone believes that, but I'm saying that this is one of the things you'll find out there among the dissidents. Okay. They usually emphasize experiments. These are people who like to go to the lab and they say, let me do an experiment. Let's do an experiment to prove your theory or something along those lines. And they're not too much into math. They're not too strong on equations. They usually think that a lot of that should not be introduced so much, that you should do a little more, physical stuff, like go to the lab and so on. Anyways, these people also accuse me of doing semantics. Okay, when I hold them to definitions, they say, well, you're a little too strong on definitions. You don't have to be so stringent, with that, so rigid. You should be a little more flexible, Bill. No, it's the flexibility that causes the problems. Because when you get around you make a definition and then you deny it by going around it or going on a tangent that kind of violates your definition, then people can't follow your presentation because now you've cheated. Now you're not being held to the definition that you put forth. And so people say, well, definitions that's grammar. That's semantics. That's philosophy. That's ontology. Don't bring that in there. We're going to do science here. We're going to do physics. This is where the problem comes. Okay, so we have some people, and I'm going to show you some examples. Today, the examples are essentially going to be all these people who are primarily dissidents, and what they propose, how they think. and why they are Flatlanders. Okay, all these people are Flatlanders. They're going to use words like plasma. They're going to use the word ether, and I want to show you. I want to expose the way they think. And so what I'm going to be going through here are comments and questions that they asked these past weeks, and I'm going to put them there so that you can analyze, how these people think or don't. We could say they don't, right? Okay, here's the first fellow, and he puts this issue here. He says, "What's the confusion, Bill? Are you arguing semantics or what?" Again, they think this is semantic. We're just using word wizardry here, magic words, words of incantation. Are you saying energy doesn't exist? So again, these people don't have it right. They've got the wrong idea of what we're doing here. We're trying to define these words, and energy is the problem with the word energy. Is first, there's no solid definition. They have several definitions of energy. The main one is that it's capacity. They say capacity, blah, 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 blah. We don't care what comes after that. It's capacity. Capacity is not a physical object. So you cannot turn that into a physical object and say you transferred capacity. You cannot transfer energy. So the problem comes when they define it as a concept and they treat it as a physical object. That's the main problem with all the language of mathematical physics. And a lot of these people, they don't understand that. They say, are you doing semantics? Or what is this that you're doing? No, it's that you talk property. We're going to hold you to talking property. You cannot start defining a term as a concept and then start bringing it as a physical object. You cannot say rock is a concept and then you use it to break a wall, or a window or whatever. That's where the problem is. And these words are treated as physical objects during the time that you do your physical interpretation. That's where it's irrational. That's where mathematical physics becomes totally irrational. Okay, so this is the issue. Okay, here we have another fellow, and he says the following. Let me put this up here. It says physics is application of scientific method to the study of physical world. Okay, great. Physics doesn't examine why something is, meaning cause, mechanism. That's what he's saying there. He says only how it is, meaning he's going to just describe it. It is completely descriptive, just like math. Well, the only reason that is so today, is that since the 17th century, the mathematicians made everyone believe that physics is about doing math and just describing mathematically. That's not what physics is about. Physics is the physical interpretation, not the mathematical description. And so this person, this individual, he believes that physics is just describing math, and for some unknown reason, it's very much like math. Yeah, of course, because math is not physics, physics is not math. Math is a description, physics is an explanation. And that's where we have a problem. When people say, well, I'm doing physics, and what they're really doing is mathematical descriptions. And she says this is why they work so well together. They work together because that's how it was defined for the last 400 years. That's the reason it is. It says no one else is using this definition of physics, meaning mine, right? And so if you came to this site, you're going to find something different than what you find out there. This is the only site in the world on the planet that says physics is physical interpretations and not mathematical descriptions. If you want these kinds of answers, you should be asking around philosophy department, not the physics one. The problem there is that, like you see in the picture there, the math guys send you to physics, to philosophy, and philosophy send you right back to math. Because if you go to any philosophy site, for example, the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy, you'll find that all the concepts related to physics have come from math. That's where the philosophers got it. And the philosophers strongly believe in what the mathematicians have fed them. So if you go to philosophy, they'll send you right back to math. So it's not that I can go out there and to the philosophers and say, look, let me convince you guys, or let me show you you guys how this universe works. No, they're going to send you right back to math, and they say, no, the mathematicians already proved and through experiment how the world works. They've got all these equations, and then when you get to the irrational definitions, they say, well, that's an interpretation. And they get them all from the mathematicians as well. So there's no difference between mathematics and philosophy. Okay? And he says, you're using philosophic definition of explanation, your definition of physics. No, hopefully we're not, we're using a new definition of physics, which is explanation. Okay, that's what it is. And he says using word games aren't productive. Again, so these people think that we're doing semantics. Okay, they dismiss all this as semantics, as word games, as word wizardry, you know. And that's not what we're doing. We're setting the foundations of physics. Okay, and the foundations means get your language straight right up front. That's what physics is about. Okay, here's another fellow, and he parrots the establishment. Okay, what does this fellow say? He says, the universe has no obligation to make sense to us. He got this directly out of the mathematicians. They put these words in his mouth. It's not that the universe has no obligation to make sense to us. You have to make sense to us. The mathematician who comes up with a theory has to make sense to us. And if he doesn't make sense, then it's irrational. That's what it's called. It's not, how can you say that he's explaining how the universe works when he's telling you in your face that he does not understand how this universe works? Entanglement, he says it works by action at a distance, whatever that is. It's known as black magic. And he says that's the way the universe works. You say, well, I don't understand it because you haven't given me a mechanism. And they answer, we don't understand it either. So we have a problem. And he says, there's always going to be another why you can add at the end of an explanation. No, there's one mechanism per question. So we answer one question at a time. And if people can't understand the mechanism, that's why you get the other why. Okay, but if you explain how the window broke, you say, well, a brick went through the window, you've answered the question. Period. We're done there. So there are no infinite whys, not in science. There's only one explanation, one mechanism per why, per question. And the difference between science and pseudoscience is that science is an ongoing process to go as deep into the why as possible. The first thing that we need to say is that nothing in science, nothing in physics, in mathematical physics, answers why questions. They do not do why questions. So this poor individual doesn't even have that idea. But then the fact that he says that science is an ongoing process, that is irrational. No, science is not an ongoing process. Science stops when you explain. Once you explain, at that point, science stops. Okay, so in the case of physics, we need to explain what we haven't been able to explain, or what the mathematicians have not been able to explain in the last 3,000 years, which is gravity, magnetism, electricity, how the atom works, and I must have missed one. What is the other one? Gravity, magnetism, electricity, the atomic works, how the atom works, and also how this universe works, essentially. Light also as well. So this is what they have to answer. And so far we have no answers from the establishment for any of those questions. Once we have those answers, we're done with science. It's not an ongoing process. You have to stop at some point and answer the question. And he says, if you manage to explain magnetism better than our current understanding, then congratulations. Everyone in the scientific community will happily accept the new definition of magnetism. The new definition of magnetism? What do you mean definition? What's this got to do with definition? You have to have an explanation of the mechanism. That's what you have to do. And the second thing is that no one in the establishment, in the so-called scientific community, will ever congratulate you if you tell them how this universe works, because they'll say that you have not followed mathematical physics. You need equations. They want descriptions. They don't want explanations. So no, you will never have an answer. Okay, this is the issue. And he says, if we did it the other way, any other way, you wouldn't be able to record this video and upload it to the internet. What is he talking about? He thinks technology is science. He thinks technology is mathematical physics. So he says, computers wouldn't work if quantum were wrong. GPS wouldn't work if general relativity were wrong. This is what this individual, he's just, all he's doing is parroting the establishment. That's all he's doing. Okay, so yeah, these are people who just memorize what the establishment feeds them, and they just absorb it and they never question it. They just bow down to the priest. That's what it is. Okay, here we have another fellow, and he says the following. You can see how all these people think or don't. They're called Flatlanders. And this fellow says the mechanism is the invisible magnet, and it's dielectric of positive and negative. Again, they bring these words positive and negative. They have no idea what that is, but they call it a mechanism. Okay? The atomic model of positive nucleus and the negative electron. Again, what are we talking about? Well, we're talking about the Rutherford-Bohr model. They're talking about that. This is what this fellow's talking about. And yeah, this is not a rational model. So the positive, negative, the nucleus or the proton and the electron, this is an irrational model. You cannot start your presentation with that model because it's an irrational model, first of all. And second, because at the end of the presentation, they say, well, by the way, that wasn't our atom anyways. He says, our sun is an example of the production of that movement of positive, negative magnetic force as plasma. Big word, plasma. That some call the solar wind. Plasma ejected from the sun. What do you mean plasma ejected from the sun? How do you eject a concept? Plasma is that little moving thing that you find in between those two magnets. And as you can see, it's moving, and as long as it's moving, you cannot treat it as a physical object. You have to make it stand still. And if you make it stand still, you won't get plasma because plasma is a dynamic concept. And so you cannot eject plasma from the sun because plasma is not something that you can eject like a stone. It is a process. Plasma is like fire, okay? And you can say, well, the fire comes out of a dragon's mouth. Well, not in science, okay? That's in ordinary speech and in fairy tales. Okay, so he says, ejected by the sun by the solar wind represents all the elements produced by the magnetic demiurge of metaphysics, whatever that is. Okay, the machine is plasma, and the ether is the magnet dielectric that originally spun up to make the building blocks of all matter, light. You don't have to believe it, but it's a fact. Well, if it's a fact, I gotta believe it, I guess, right? And I guess this guy, he just believes it because he thinks it's a fact. That's what he learned by rote in high school or wherever, and he just spits it out. So he talks about words like plasma and ether and plasma being ejected by the sun. Next thing he's going to say that the ether vibrates. Can you believe that? Maybe. I don't know what he's going to say. Okay, here's another fellow, and what does he say about all these fantastic words that they use in dissident Flatlander, okay? Flatland. Fellow says, the thing between the particles that makes them pull is virtual particles. Okay, so you have all these virtual particles that, come into existence and out of existence constantly. And okay, let's even concede that. How do all these discrete particles pull two particles together? That's the question. Explain the mechanism to me. And he says this quantum theory principle answers, in the estimation of quantum theorists anyway, your basic objection. Now, this doesn't answer anything, but see, these people don't even know what they're talking about. If plasma, if virtual particles, ether, whatever you want to call it, is all these particles that are in the background, okay, let's concede it. Okay, so we have all these particles in the background. How do particles pull two particles together? Show me the mechanism. Okay, no math, just show me the mechanism. Let's go to the lab and show me how you pull on a donkey by throwing particles at it, throwing stones, sand, whatever you throw at it. I want you to pull the donkey. Okay, when you explain that mechanism, when you show it to me in the lab, well, maybe I'll believe it. See, I can show you how I can pull with a rope. Okay, I tie this end, okay, to the donkey, and this to my hand. I can pull on the donkey, and you can see the mechanism of how, with a rope, I can pull on the donkey. I can mimic, I can simulate the mechanism. Do the same thing with any kind of particles, virtual particles, real particles, fake particles, conspiracy theory particles, hoax particles, any particle you wish. I want you to throw the particle at the donkey, show me how the donkey is pulled towards you physically. Okay, that's the issue. So don't tell me you're going to pull with virtual particles. You're going to pull two particles, here we have two particles. And you're going to pull them together by what? By having particles between them? How are you going to pull these together with particles? That's what I want you to explain. The mechanism. We illustrate, that's fine. Then I'll believe. Okay? Just show it to me. Show me the mechanism. Not even God can do that. Okay, here's another fellow. He says, gravity didn't create all the stars and black holes. A collision did. The Big Bang Theory is an utter fact. All these people, they talk about fact, they know everything. They're so arrogant. They know it all. Okay, so you can't even talk to them because they're not even listening. They just want to teach, and they tell you Big Bang Theory is a fact. Okay, so how does he explain this? Well, he says all energy, including gravity. Okay, energy is a concept, gravity is a concept, is a manipulation of field. Another concept with energy. Another concept, no energy, no gravity. All concepts so far. So far we haven't learned anything. All he said is that love is made of intelligence, which is made of data, which is made of who knows what. Okay, energy is energized dark matter. Okay, we finally know what energy is. It's energized dark matter. I like the fact that he defines energy with energized. Okay, that's great. The energy a mass ejects from an object is replaced by the pressure of space. The pressure of space. I thought space was nothing. So this fellow says that space somehow is a something and it causes pressure like a piston, I guess. All this pressure that is upon us from space, it's squeezing us, right? This manipulation causes the force of gravity. Okay, so far we haven't learned anything because so far all he's mentioned is concepts. We don't have a physical object in that whole, in those paragraphs or those statements. There's not a single physical object. He cannot make a movie of anything that he just put in there. And yes, the gut, the grand unified theory, is about gravity, and space caused it. Space causes it. Space causes gravity, okay? Gravity is a manipulation of the field of space with energy. Now you learned it? Finally we know after 3,000 years. A theory must be able to be explained to a 6-year-old, and my theory is the one that can do it. Absolutely loved it, okay? How ignorant can these people be? I mean, what are these? I ask myself when I read some of these comments, these questions, right? I ask myself, what are these people doing in physics? What are these people doing in science? They should be in church on Sundays praying for their salvation. They don't have the mental capacity to do physics. They don't even know the basics, the foundations, nothing. They just come up with theories. They say, oh, I think I got it. You know, they come up with a couple things there and they say, I think I know how to explain this. And they say the most absurd things. Why? In great measure, because they don't have their language straight. Okay, that is what the issue is. Okay, here's another fellow talks about the origin of the universe. Let's find out how the universe originated. You know, matter. Okay, here it is. He says, the beginning of the universe is unknowable. The beginning of the universe is unknowable. No, it is knowable. We know it for a fact. There's no question about it. Let me explain the origin of the universe so that you understand it and you know it. Okay? I'm going to explain the universe so that there is no doubt about it. Okay? You learned it here for the first time. Okay, here it is. Okay? I put it up here so we have something to, let me put it on this side. Okay, learn it right. You can put it as a prayer tonight. You know, when you pray next to your bed tonight, okay, read this prayer. Okay? Something, that which has shape. Nothing, that which doesn't have shape. Okay? Something is an antonym of nothing. They are opposites. One has shape, the other one is that which does not have shape. Okay, we got that so far? Okay, now this is the first law of the universe. I want you to memorize this. Read it every night. Make it your Lord's Prayer, you know. Something can't morph into nothing. Nothing can't morph into something. We got it? Okay? You cannot turn something into nothing. You cannot turn nothing into something. How does nothing acquire spontaneously or, you know, all of a sudden, you know, length, width, and height and become something? And how does something, which has length, width, and height, suddenly lose length, width, and height, all three dimensions simultaneously and become nothing? If you can explain the mechanism, with or without God, I'll concede God to you. I'll concede God. You want to do it with God? Do it with God. No problem. Bring God into the picture. Show me how God converts something into nothing or nothing into something. If you cannot explain the mechanism, you don't have a rational theory, and you cannot say something came out of nothing. You cannot talk about the origin. You cannot talk about creation with or without God, because you cannot explain the mechanism of how something came from absolutely nothing, again, with or without God. And so what do the relativists do? Well, they created a theory known as the Big Bang Theory. And the Big Bang Theory goes more or less like this, okay? They say, look, the way we see it today, the universe is expanding. All galaxies are receding from all other galaxies. The universe is blowing up before our very eyes. It's the balloon inflation theory. You know, you have this inflating balloon, it gets bigger and bigger and bigger, okay? And let me get this out of here for a second. here you have the balloon, and it's getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And because it gets bigger, all the galaxies are on the surface. Allegedly, this is the general relativity version. So because the balloon is getting bigger, the galaxies are receding from each other because they're like polka dots on a balloon that you inflate. So you inflate it, and the balloon gets bigger, the dots get farther away from each other. That's the theory. That's where we are today, according to mathematical physics, according to general relativity. What happens when you uninflate, when you pinch the balloon, so to speak? It becomes smaller and smaller and smaller. The galaxies come closer and closer and closer together. That means if we were to run the tape, the videotape backwards, right? We would arrive at square one, right? And we would see that all the galaxies somehow converge upon a point, okay? Point, infinite mass almost, very heavy point, very massive point, small point, and they call that the singularity. Okay, so this is the starting point, so to speak. Okay, you have the singularity, and it's this little, you can conceive of it or think of it as a little point, a little speck of dust that weighs as much as all the matter in the universe. Okay, think of it like that. You can say almost infinite mass in a tiny speck of dust. Okay, that's what you're supposed to think of it as. Okay, and you say, okay, where did the speck of dust, where did this grain of sand come from? This so-called singularity, which is really a zero volume infinite energy. It's just energy there. In the middle of what? Because that singularity contains space as well. So we don't know what's outside of space. They say there's nothing outside of space, but that's what space is, nothing. So we have a little bit of a contradiction. But what's the problem with the Big Bang Theory? The Big Bang Theory is this. They take you to square number 2. They take you to frame number 2 in the movie, okay? They don't take you to frame number 1. We don't know how the little dot came into being, the little singularity. How did that come into being? And then what's the black stuff? Because if the little dot includes space, time, and matter, what is the black stuff on which against which the little thing is expanding? And that's when they say, well, it's not expanding against nothing. It's expanding against nothing, or there is nothing outside of it. And you say, well, that's what space is. That's what's inside of that little dot. Nothing. Space. So what's the black stuff? That's outside of space. So you got to define that. You got to tell me what it is. And they say there's nothing there. So we have an object, supposedly the universe, which is that little dot, which is encapsulated by nothing, which is what space is, which is inside the universe. Okay, so you don't even have God there on the outside or dimensions or anything. Anyways, the issue is that they take you to frame 1, they never to frame 2, they never take you to frame 1. We have no idea how the dot came into being. And the reason the relativists say, well, we never go to frame number 1, we always go to frame number 2, because we cannot tell you how that dot came into being. And the issue they're evading is what the religious folk throw at them. They say, you're trying to avoid God. God made the singularity. And so they get into this fight. Well, who made God? And they say God's always been there, and blah, blah, blah. They get all these fights between the religious folk and so-called religious folk and the so-called physicists, the mathematical physicists, the Flatlanders of the mainstream. And they get into these debates on, whether God exists or not. And they say, well, we don't believe in God, but we're not going to tell you what happened in frame number 1 because we don't know. And we start at frame number 2, which is where the singularity is already there, and it expanded, exploded, and we don't know what happened before that. So we don't have a moment of creation because we don't know how the singularity was created, okay? And the other guys say, well, God, and what is God? Well, God is eternal. But for that matter, we can just say that matter is eternal. Doesn't that solve the problem? We get rid of God and we get rid of Big Bang, both of them. We just say matter is eternal because matter cannot turn into space. Space cannot turn into matter. Something cannot turn into nothing. Nothing cannot turn into something spontaneously, right? All of its own. Even with or without a cause. Explain the mechanism. If you cannot explain the mechanism, then we do have an answer to creation. It never happened.